5 books and counting. The Tales from the Omni Vault continues to expand as a universe. Go ahead and check the links down in the description to get your copies today. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I'm the Omni Viewer. And yes, I know I'm a couple days late, but give me a break. Christmas just happened. Now I can finally talk about the latest episode of MONARCH since the holiday has passed. And with this particular episode, I'm going to be honest, it wasn't my favorite. There is some good stuff to say about it. For example, we finally get to learn what the deal is with May, and that May is not in fact her real name. So she was like the holdout when it came to proper backstory, at least as far as the 3 primary characters went. Obviously, there's still a lot that they're holding back about Shaw, although I'll get to him in a moment. But finally learning what her deal is, that was... I'm not disappointed with the story. In fact, it did tie into the larger picture. At first I wasn't too sure, because it seemed like it kind of was coming out of left field. Okay, what is this company? Just this random tech company that she's working for. There seems to be no connection anywhere here. Okay, she goes into the strangely low-tech industrial basement and sees footage of a chimpanzee in a helmet, and that terrifies her to the point where she sabotages it all. I mean, sure, animal experimentation would get to anyone, but what does this have to do with anything else? Is this just a random thing, or is it going to tie in somehow? And then, of course, when she's essentially kidnapped and speaking to her boss, she casually name drops Walter, and I was like, oh, wait a minute, that rings a bell. Is this going where I think it's going? Because, you know, Walter's not that uncommon of a name. And by the end, we of course learn that what we are seeing here is May working for Walt Disney, specifically his frozen head, which is conspiring against Warner Brothers for getting the rights to Godzilla. No, obviously that's not what it is. It's Walter Simmons, who by the end of this episode rebrands his company as Apex, and now the monkey thing makes sense. They were experimenting with the control device that will eventually be used to at least attempt controlling Mechagodzilla. So, okay, we get some backstory, we get a little bit of world building. Whether or not it's completely necessary world building, I don't know, but still, it ties into things, and those parts of the episode, yeah, those work. Also, the way in which the characters from Monarch and our primary players start to interact and start to come to something of an understanding, at least in some regards, that also had some good moments to it. But overall, I do feel like this episode took a bit of a dip in quality. Okay, so let's start with what's going on with Lee Shaw. The last time we saw him, he was a mysterious figure, sure, but we at least had a sense that we could trust him. He was clearly up to something. The revelation that he wants to help Godzilla certainly might come out of left field to our primary characters, but to us in the audience, who already know that Godzilla is, for all intents and purposes, an anti-hero in this universe, it does make a certain degree of sense that Shaw, being involved from the beginning and having been there from the first time man encountered Godzilla, would be looking at this scenario and saying, Godzilla's side is the side I want to be on, so I'm going to be doing what I can to assist him. And if that happens to involve betraying Monarch, who hasn't exactly been very nice to him and has been kind of run into the ground over the years, then so be it. Necessary sacrifice. But then he makes his appearance in this episode, and all of a sudden he's acting like a supervillain, walking in, proclaiming his full name and that he's taking over this base and talking about being on the right side of history and getting all of these weapons, these like high-powered military-grade weapons, and then killing the Frostvark at the end of the episode. It feels almost like I missed an episode. Like he suddenly went from kind of strange, but you want to trust him, to mustache twirling evil when nobody was looking. And I know I didn't miss an episode. There is no episode between the last one I watched and this one. So, I don't know. That maybe this is going to make sense by the end. Maybe it's intentionally being shown this way to make us question. But if that is the case, it was a really slapdash way of doing it. It kind of feels like it comes out of nowhere. Like this version of Shaw is not the one we've been following. I know that there are people out there who think that the young version of Shaw played by Wyatt Russell feels like a different character compared to the older version played by Kurt Russell. Well, this version's episode of Shaw feels like a different character to what Kurt Russell has been playing up to this point. Again, maybe there's a way to tie it in. Maybe they're intentionally misdirecting. But this was a very clumsy way to do it, if you ask me. And I don't know. I'm not entirely sure how they're going to tie things up. I'm hoping that they're not just going to have Shaw suddenly become a full-blown villain. But then again, they do also need to explain potentially where all those eco-terrorists and King of the Monsters come from. I mean, if they bothered establishing the origins of Apex in this series, which doesn't tie in until Godzilla vs. Kong, they might be laying the seeds for that. But again, any scenario where this plays out by the end and it makes sense doesn't necessarily change the fact that here it wasn't handled all that well. It kind of just felt like it was giving me whiplash. But then there's another element to this episode that kind of threw me for a loop and makes me wonder just exactly what this show is going for. Now, before I get into that though, I'd like to remind anyone who has either forgotten or is just tuning in at this moment what my thoughts are on the revelation that our essentially primary character, Kate, is a lesbian, which was revealed in a previous episode to this, when we were flashing back to the events of G-Day. My response to this revelation and the controversy that surrounded it was that it really wasn't all that controversial. It was actually, if you look at it from a writing perspective, an interesting bit of character development for her. Because what we're seeing here is that in the events of G-Day, before her life was turned upside down, she was essentially doing the exact same thing that she has now discovered her father to be doing, minus the globe-trotting and monster hunting. She was two-timing someone she loved with someone else who she probably also proclaimed love for. She is her father's daughter, and she had no realization of it at that point. So, all of a sudden, with that revelation, the way she's been acting in previous episodes kind of makes sense. Yeah, she's been standoffish. Yeah, she's had a weird form of PTSD. Yeah, she's closed off and not really opening up to the other characters and acting kind of bitter and mean and angry. But you kind of get the sense with this revelation that she's just as angry at herself as she is at her father. This added a layer of complexity, and that layer of complexity exists regardless of labels and sexuality and whatnot. It makes the character a bit more interesting, and I thought that was an interesting way to do it. Now, sure, they probably decided to make her specifically a lesbian for the ESG scores. I'm not stupid, I'm not naive. That is probably the primary reason they decided to go that direction. But the way it was handled tells me that they weren't doing it just for ESG. They weren't just pandering, if they were even pandering at all. It seemed at the time like they were actually attempting to have a well-crafted character. A character who would transcend pandering. A character that you couldn't just claim was the put a chick in it and make her gay type of character. That was what I thought at the time. And I also acknowledge that there was still potential for them to screw it up. There were still plenty of episodes left for them to somehow fumble it. But at the moment, it made sense. Now, I bring all of that up because it seems an awful lot like this latest episode is attempting to make Kate and May a couple. And if that's the case, it came right the heck out of nowhere. Now, it's possible that's not what's going on, but I'm watching this show with other people, and as we were watching it, those other people were going, wait a minute, are they trying to imply that Kate and May are an item now? Where did that come from? So clearly other people are getting that from this as well. And if you look at the way they interact here and how Kate for some reason just suddenly forgives May for the betrayal that happened in the earlier episodes, which again, that's another thing this episode kind of felt like was poorly handled. But anyway, staying on topic. Considering that was cast aside and now they're acting very affectionate, and there's that moment where they're holding hands at the end and Ken kind of gives him a sideways glance like, oh man, she has no idea what she's in for. And of course the fact that this episode was written by Mariko Tamaki, who has previously written a rather infamous comic book for DC with a lesbian romance in it, a comic that is almost universally despised, and she herself is a lesbian, so I'm sure she's following the subject of write what you know. The evidence does seem to at least be skewing in that direction, that Kate and May are going to at least form something of a romantic bond as the episodes progress from here. Again, I could be wrong, but it seems like that's the direction it's going. And if it is, like I said, where the heck did that come from? Okay, again, I want to clarify some points here. The revelation that Kate was a lesbian, yes, that was revealed kind of suddenly, but looking back at previous episodes, there was really no reason for us to know it prior to the flashback. After all, there was no opportunity for her sexuality to come up, and the series is set in 2015, way before people became obsessed with introducing their pronouns alongside their names. So there was no reason for her to just go telling people about how gaily gay she gays about. She didn't even want to be in these scenarios, so she was closed off. She wasn't going to reveal that. May, we saw, did hook up with Ken when she first met him, and I mean, Ken's a guy, obviously, so that at least told us that she likes men. Maybe you could also argue there was no reason for us to learn information that she might also like women as well and therefore be bisexual. But at the same time, she's shown no particular interest in other women. There's been no hinting of that up to this point. We've only seen her be physically, if not romantically, involved with a man. And now this episode is kind of implying that Kate and May are starting to form a romantic bond, which, again, their interactions up to this point have not given any hints of this. At their most passionate, their interactions have been completely platonic, and at times even a little bit confrontational. They're on friendly terms in certain points, sure, and at other points they're at each other's throats, like when we learn that May betrayed the team. But there was no indication of romance, no indication of attraction. So again, if this is the case, this is where we would say pandering is occurring, because it seems like they're trying to pair Kate and May together just so they can have a pairing, even if that pairing comes out of nowhere. And this would be just as forced and ridiculous if it was a heterosexual coupling that just came right out of nowhere. When May and Ken hooked up in their flashback, they at least took a little time to establish that there was a bit of magnetism between them. That, you know, they did kind of see in each other a potential for at least a good one-night stand. But here, I haven't gotten any of that in the previous episodes. And now we're getting hints that they might be setting this up. Again, I keep it saying, I could be wrong. But if I'm not wrong, if that is the direction this show is going, then, again, really bad way to handle it if you ask me, because there was no build-up to it. Bottom line, this episode was not a very good one. Now, I suppose I can give the series credit for taking this long to get to an episode that was subpar, and one bad episode does not condemn the whole series, per se. It could be a turning point, or it could just be a bump in the road. But all the same, it does feel like this episode was a step down. There's still time to course correct, there's still time to deliver on a satisfying finale that ties everything together and leaves the audience feeling like it was worth the journey, but not every step of the journey is going to be great, and I don't think this particular episode was either. But I guess statistically speaking, they can't all be winners, right? Anyway, that's just where I stand on the matter. Until such time as we meet again, this is the Omni Viewer signing off. Thank you all for watching. Now be sure to head down to the description to check us out on other platforms, as well as find links to the 5 current books in the Tales from the Omni Vault universe. Again, thank you all, and we'll see you next time.